Now, let me give you just a little bit of review so you get your head back in the game. This is absolutely a two-part masterpiece of redemption. You cannot study Judges on itself. People who have tried to do that try to make it better and help it out, and they don't really need to because Ruth actually does that. Second thing, the big cycle that we saw, of course, was this: sin, oppression, distress, and deliverance. But the worst part is it gets even more corrupt. So indeed, the only way to describe it is in fact a downward spiral, so that by the time we get to Samson, we are at indeed the bottom. So with the whole discussion, I think you pretty well followed along with Jephthah, and now indeed with Samson. The treatment of women, the way it makes you feel, is all really, really negative. And of course, sadly, it just keeps getting worse. But I don't want you to look at typical depictions of him and see this kind of picture and think, oh, wow, look what a great guy this was. You could take the jawbone of a donkey and do anything. No, you're totally missing the story. Right? Viewed through Deuteronomic lens, viewed through a Jewish lens, they would look at that picture right there and think, wow, that hurts. That's so sad. What an incredibly compromised guy he was by totally breaking his Nazirite vow. And of course, he just keeps doing that over and over and over. And as we saw the whole story, his view of women, the way he treated his wife, what happens to his wife. And then, of course, this whole story of Gaza, which starts here, chapter 16, verse 1. One day, Samson went to Gaza as though it was just a normal thing, because it probably was for him. Right? It's like thinking of the worst place, the most sinful place you can think of. I mean, it's probably overdone to think of Las Vegas as overly sinful, right? But it's like saying, somebody was going downtown to the prostitute district every night. Right? Why are you doing that? What's going on here? And of course, that's again part of the irony. And so he takes the gate and he carries it up to Hebron, as we've seen a couple times now, I think. And even this picture isn't too bad, because you know that little guy is not going to carry that big gate anywhere at all. And of course, to carry it 40 miles up to Hebron is indeed a feat of the Spirit of God. But again, the lesson, of course, is he's using the abilities, using the gifts, using the opportunities that God gives him for selfish ends. And then, of course, when they do catch him with the story of Delilah, they take him back to Gaza. Why? Well, I'm sure that because of this incident, right, these guys had their gate ripped out, and I'm sure that the guys up in Hebron were pretty good trash talkers. I mean, I can only imagine, but I'm sure the guys in Hebron looked down at the guys in Gaza and said, hey, you guys missing a gate? Huh? We got an extra one up here. You want your gate back? No, don't. That's embarrassing. We don't want to hear about it. We don't want to hear your trash talk about this guy taking our gate. Okay, all right, but you know what? When they do get him with Delilah, then they take him back to Gaza and say, you think you're hot stuff now? Right? And indeed, they gouge his eyes out, right? Because he has no spiritual sight to begin with. And they do to him physically what is true of him spiritually, and they gouge out his eyes and put him at grinding grain, the job in this culture for a woman to do. And then, of course, in the end, he comes to his senses, and he indeed kills more Philistines in his death than even before. But here's the biggest problem with this. When you look at this story, and you realize it's not about, start working with what you have. This is not what's going on, right? You realize that what happens is this, or what you hope would happen is this. You hope that he would sit there, blinded, grinding grain, and he would repent, and he would say, oh God, I have sinned before you. I have wasted my life. I have used the gifts you've given me for selfish ends. I have not led your people. I have not been a good judge. I have been a total failure. But now, God, I repent and I pray that you would use me to bring glory to you. I mean, you could hope for that kind of redemption. But if you do, you're never going to find it. Because even in the end, it tells us why he got this power from God and what he was asking for? And the answer is right here, right? You see it here? And the Philistines, let me, with one blow, get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes. I mean, that's the statement that he asks for, right? Again, it's still about personal vengeance. It's not about God's glory or anything. And so you look at this story and you feel like, oh my goodness, this is the best we have to work with? And the answer is, yeah, that's it. That's it. And it just makes you long. It makes you long for someone who could just approach God humbly and not arrogantly and just want something good for God and his reputation. You know, even if you're just a little kid or a little boy with a slingshot, if you could just come along and say, who is this that insults the armies of the living God? Right? This is the way you fight Philistines. Okay? Now I'm borrowing from the future, but this is what we need, and this is all we have right now. Okay? So let's move on and finish this book with 2 indeed perfect stories. I keep saying indeed today a lot, don't I? 2 perfect stories. This is where we see the phrase for the very first time in Judges 17:6 that is so attached to the book of Judges. In those days there was no king in Israel, right? But every man did that which was right in his own eyes. And when most people say that, most of what you hear today is, wow, it's just like in the book of Judges. Everybody's doing what's right in their own eyes. But when they say that, they're kind of missing part of it. And here's what I mean. When I look at this phrase, I think there are 2 parts to it. There's a red part and there's a blue part. There's no king, and everybody did what was right in his own eyes. Which one of those is more important? That is there a cause and effect relationship? Is one the cause and is one the symptom? You say, well, why do you ask? Why do we care? Well, it's not just a grammatical distinction, right? I mean, when you go to the doctor, you want the doctor, if he can, to fix the cause of the problem. You don't care about having the symptoms masked primarily. You want to get the problem fixed, so you get the whole thing, and then the symptoms go away. So which is it here? Is the problem there's no king, or is the problem there's chaos, which keeps us from having a king or something like that? And if you just simply look at the other places where the phrase shows up, you'll find that it's in Judges 18, Judges 19, and the very last verse in the book, Judges 21:25. Now, you probably look at that and say, well, Dr. Miller, you edited the thing out. You took the blue out of 18 and 19, but I didn't. I didn't take it out. The writer didn't write it in there. Why? Because I think the writer's simply trying to say in a not so subtle way, there's one of these that's twice as important as the other. Right? And the cause is there's no king in Israel, and the effect is there's moral chaos. So what do you spend your time doing? Decrying the moral chaos? No. You spend your time saying, man, we really do need a king. So these last 2 stories in particular demonstrate this. I mean, if the story of Samson didn't do it for us, this one does, right? We need something better. So let's take a look at the very first story really quickly, because I don't want to waste my time on Micah, because he's one of the major players. Micah, a Levite from Bethlehem and the tribe of Dan. So we start out here with Micah's story in chapter 17 and verse 1, and the writer skillfully just drops us right down into the middle of an ongoing story with these words. Now a man named Micah from the hill country of Ephraim said to his mother, the 1,100 shekels of silver that were taken from you and about which I have heard you utter a curse, I have that silver with me, I took it. Then his mother said, the Lord bless you, my son. Now let's just stop here for a second, okay? This guy is such an incredible loser, he steals money from his mom, right? And he doesn't feel bad about it, but when he hears his mom utter a curse, he doesn't want the curse, so he goes and gives it back. And then she says to him, oh, my sweet little thief, the Lord bless you. What can I do for you? She says, I know what I'll do. I'll make you a real nice idol. So she does, okay? She makes him an idol, and he put him in his house. Now this man Micah had a shrine, he made an ephod and some idols, and installed one of his sons, which he can't do because he's from the wrong tribe, right? As his priest. Now, if you're reading this thing through with a Deuteronomic lens, and that's what we ought to be doing, right? What does Deuteronomy have to say about this? You realize that everything is going wrong. And again, if you're reading as a critical reader, you say, well, you can't do that. Well, you can't do that. That's wrong. Ooh, that's bad. And by the time you get down to verse 5, your response should be, what is going on? And that's why the writer says, well, I'll tell you what. Verse 6, in those days, Israel had no king, and everyone did as he saw fit. And you have to say, wow, they sure did. They really did. Right? Now, it doesn't get any better. In fact, it gets worse. Because then it says this, a young Levite from Bethlehem wasn't happy where God put him, so he's running around. And Micah said, hey, you want a job promotion? He says, sure. Come on in and be my priest. Right? And so he makes him his own priest. Now, again, you just can't, I'm not going to go into it now, but you can't do that. And then here's the irony, and this is another reason why you have to be a critical reader. Verse 13, in the last verse, Micah said, now I know the Lord will be good to me since this Levite has become my priest. Now, don't believe everything you read, okay? Now, I'm not saying the Bible isn't true. I'm saying make sure you understand that the writer is really smart. He's really nuanced. Just because Micah said it doesn't mean it's true. He's just trying to tell you what Micah thinks. Wow, God's going to be good to me because I violated 16 rules right in a row. You're an idiot, right? That's what Micah is here. So the next part of the story involves the tribe of Dan. Very briefly, here's what they do. They were given territory by Joshua, by God through Joshua, right over here, and you can see where it is, right? You can see why, we're not sure we want to try to settle and conquer this area, because they're big guys here. Right? This is where Goliath lives. It's where chariots live, and they don't want to be there. So they decide, we're not going to do that. We're going to go somewhere better. I mean, I know God told us to go here, but we're going somewhere better. So they decide to go up here into the north, and this is where they settle. And so from now on, the way you talk about the north and the south is to say from Dan to Beersheba. Right? Now, in this process of going north, they meet Micah's Levite, and they see he has some really fine idols. I like the way they say it here. They come back and they see the idols again on their way to get their families, and they say, well, you know what to do, which means if you want the idol, just go take it. And they do. They go to take the idol, and Micah's Levite says, wait, that's stealing. You can't do that. That's morally wrong. And they say, look, if you come with us and help us pack up the idols, we'll give you a job promotion, and you can be a Levite, a priest, over the whole tribe. And he says, okay, I'll help you pack up. Suddenly it's no longer morally wrong. It's a job promotion. So he goes. And then Micah comes after him and says, wait, you took my gods. Again, I hate it when people take my gods. You took the gods I made and my priests and went away, and what else do I have? Right now, right there. If you're an involved reader, you want to say, what else do I have? You could try Yahweh. You could try the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But you get the sense that he wouldn't hear you even if you told him that. Incredibly sad story. I'm tired of that one. I'm going on to the next one, okay? Chapters 19 to 21, last story in the book. This one, again, is about a Levite and his concubine. Notice that both of these involved Levites, right? People who were charged with instructing people in God's law. And this Levite has a concubine. Now, it calls her a concubine, right? But then her dad is called his father-in-law, her father-in-law, his father-in-law. So I don't know if it's some sort of quasi-marriage sexual object kind of thing or what, but it's not what it ought to be. She runs away from him. And so he chases after her, and her dad gladly welcomes him. Another instance, of course, in fact, all of this, you have to be alert, right? You don't look at that and say, oh, it must have been a nice relationship, right? You look at that and say, what is going on? Well, let me just put it in these terms. If some guy came and took one of my daughters and used her as a sexual object, and she ran away from him and came home, and he came after her, I would gladly welcome him, and with my son, with shotguns and muzzle loaders and everything, we would I mean, if somebody had the gall to actually come back to my house and who did that to my daughter, I would not say, oh, the guy who abuses my little girl, come right on in, right? And you look at this dad and you say, what is wrong with this dad? Why can't this dad protect his daughter? Why is, I mean, and there are a million questions like that. Right? So they stay for a couple days, and they get ready to leave. And when they leave, they were near Jebus, and the day was almost gone. And the servant said to his master, let's stop at the city of the Jebusites and spend the night. The master replied, no, we won't go into an alien city whose people are not Israelites. We'll go on to Gibeah. Let's try to reach Gibeah, right? So the whole story looks like this. They're in Bethlehem. They're going north to Jerusalem, or Jebus, not called Jerusalem yet, called Jebus. And the servant says, no, the master says, no, we can't say that, that's pagan. Let's go up here to the godly city, Gibeah, to one of the Israelite cities. And when we get up there, you know how the story goes. There was a guy in the center of town who said, this is not safe, you need to come home with me. And when they get home, of course, the men of the city come along and say, bring out the man who came to your house so we can have sex with him. Now, this whole story is painted in the same colors, the same tones, the same expressions, the same details as another story in the Bible that I trust you noticed pretty quickly, right? This is what story all over again? Sodom and Gomorrah. Conveniently, Judges 19, Genesis 19, okay? I mean, they're not supposed to be parallel like that, but the stories are absolutely parallel. It just makes it nice. They're both in chapter 19. But here's the difference. I mean, Sodom and Gomorrah is always a standard of evil in the Old Testament. Like, these people were as bad as the people in Sodom and Gomorrah. In the New Testament, Jesus uses it too. And actually, he says there's only one thing worse than Sodom and Gomorrah, and that's self-righteous hypocrites. He says, who do you think you are, Capernaum? Do you think you'll be exalted to heaven? No, I tell you, in that day, it'll be more tolerable for Sodom and Gomorrah than it is you. So Capernaum was even lower because they heard the story of Jesus and rejected it, right? But still, Sodom and Gomorrah is at least a standard of, okay, this is bad. Now, the difference, of course, is now we're supposed to be in an Israelite city. And the Israelites who have taken over the land are now doing the same things or even worse than the people in the Canaanites who lived there before. So, the story goes on. They're asking for the guy, but the guy doesn't go out. So the man took his concubine and sent her outside to them. In fact, in Hebrew, it's very literal. It's not like he said, hey, why don't you go? It's like he pushed her out the door. So they raped and abused her all night long. At daybreak, the woman went back to the house where her master was staying, fell down at the door, and lay there till midnight, till daylight. Right? Then her master got up in the morning and opened the door of the house and stepped out to continue on his way. There lay his concubine fallen in the doorway of the house with her hands on the threshold. Now, why all the detail? Why does the writer tell you exactly where her hands were? Because he wants you to picture this story in your mind. If the doorway is here, when he goes out to continue on his way, how does he have to do it? He has to pull one of these, right? He has to step over her because she's laying right there in the doorway. Not like this, not like this. It's not like he got down on one knee and cupped her face in his hands and said, oh, honey, I'm so sorry. Look what I've done to you. That this should have happened to me, and you took this in my place, and I didn't even, I had a good night's sleep. I wasn't even worried enough about you to do anything until daylight, and then none of that. None of that. Just get up, let's go. Oh man, look what they did to my property. Do you notice that again in a literary genius sort of a way what this woman's name is? She didn't even have a name. You know why? Because she's not a person. She's just an object. That's how she's treated. She's a piece of property. Look what they did to my piece of property. Cuts up his property in 12 pieces, sends them off to the 12 tribes of Israel, and says, man, look what these Gibeonites did to my property. So, the rest of the country comes and destroys Benjamin, the entire tribe, because they defend the guys in Gibeah. And then they say to themselves, whoops, look what we did. There's a big oops. We destroyed the tribe of Israel. Can't have that. What are we going to do? Because we destroyed all the women of Benjamin, all the boys, all the girls. All that are left are 600 men who escaped. So, since they can't have children on their own, what are we going to do to bring back this tribe? Well, we can't give them our kids, our daughters, so what should we do? Well, let's see. One guy comes up with a bright idea. You know, there was a city that didn't go with us in the battle. That was Jabesh Gilead. Let's go down, and here's a great idea. Let's kill all the guys in Jabesh Gilead. Let's kill all the moms. Let's kill all the brothers and see how many young girls we have left. And indeed, they do that, and they end up with 400 orphans. I mean, just think about that, ladies. They come and kill your mom and dad and brothers and say, hey, would you like to marry a remnant of one of the most perverse tribes in the nation of Israel? That's what every girl dreams of, isn't it? And then they say, man, we've got 400, but we have 600 bachelors, so what are we going to do? Well, there's this annual festival in Shiloh where the girls get together for kind of a beat the blahs weekend, and I'll tell you what, you guys go up there, you 200 guys go up there and you just grab one, and we'll look the other way. Yeah, that's a good idea. That's a great idea. That'll solve everything. And they do. And you say to yourself, and that's exactly how the book ends. What is wrong with this picture? We don't have enough time. It's much easier to say what is right with this picture, and the answer is nothing, nothing, nothing. Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. So what in the world good does this book do? Well, as we move through the stories, we're going to look for three things. Number one is their progress, and what we've seen is that we have gone down, 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 down. Male leadership evaporates and the whole culture falls apart. Number two, what is your own affective response? I won't take time to ask you, but I'll just tell you that mine, I'm going to say, pretty sick and empty. You understand sick, certainly. You'll understand empty in a minute. How does the role of women relate to the main theme? We asked that question, and I think it's fair to say now that women especially suffer the effects of sin when the culture decays. The nation's relationship with God, I would even go this far and say their relationship with God is accurately measured by the way they treat women. So if we were going to take their spiritual temperature based on this chapter, what is it? It's cold, it's dead, it's not even alive spiritually. So what does it do? Because when we finished, Joshua, we were feeling pretty good, and we said, well, maybe we're going to get the leader. And all this book does is just do this. It says, you know what? That's really empty. That's really empty. And you know what else it does? It does this. If I ask you, when we were taking a look at Genesis 12, 1, 2, and 3 to begin with, or even later, anywhere in the process up till now, and I said to you, what is the relative proportion of those promises? How important are they? You could be forgiven for saying, well, I think they're probably like, 1/3 each, right? The land's like 33% of it, and the nation's 33%, and the leaders 33%. But let's just think about it. You can have the land and you can have the nation. If you don't have the right leader, what have you got? You just got the Canaanites all over again, don't you? Right? I think based on this story, I'm going to have to reassign my proportion. I'm going to say the land's probably worth 1%, the nation's worth 1%, and the leader's worth about 98. Because if you don't have the leader, you don't have anything. And what does this book do for us? Does it advance the progress of Revelation? Does it edify us? Does it build us up? And it says, yeah, because you really, really, really need this leader. Well, is he ever going to come? I don't know. Let's take a look at the next story. And here's where the problem comes, because you look at Judges and it's this ugly, ugly national mess, and you look at Ruth and it's this loving personal love story, and it doesn't look like there's any connection at all, right? But indeed, Ruth chapter 1 says, in the days when the judges ruled. Now, that is a divinely inspired clue that this book has to be taken in connection with the previous one. And whatever sweet little romantic love stories or lessons you've heard from the book of Ruth, rethink them completely in light of 1:1. Right? Because maybe as you read the book of Ruth before and it started out, in the days when the judges ruled, maybe you said to yourself, oh, I'll bet that was a sweet time. Oh, what a nice romantic time when things were simple, right? And the truth is, when you read that, now you know and you say, oh God, not again. I can't take another one of the stories about the days when the judges ruled. No, please. Do we have to read this? That's what you should say. So let's look how that impacts and colors the message of the book, because it does and it's supposed to. So in the days when the judges ruled, here is what happened. Naomi is empty. You'll see why I use that language again as we move through here. But basically, she lives in Bethlehem, and there's a famine there, and so she has to go down to Moab on the other side of the Dead Sea. Now, it's a little bit punny. It's kind of a little bit cute, because there's a famine in Bethlehem. Say, what's so punny about that? Well, because Bethlehem means house of bread. So there is no bread in the house of bread. So she's empty. So she has to go, and she goes to Moab with her husband and 2 sons, and they marry 2 girls, Oprah and Ruth. When the boys die and they're on their way back, Oprah says, no, I've got TV shows and magazines to do. I ain't coming. I'm going to stay right here in Moab. She kind of serves as a little bit of a foil, right, as a contrast to Ruth. And Ruth says, no, your people will be my people and your God will be my God. Now again, that's a really sweet little plaque to give to your friends who are getting married. But let's think about that for a second. Think what Ruth is doing here when she says, I'm a single woman. I'm going to leave my dad. I'm going to leave my brothers. I no longer have a husband. And I'm going to go back, where the men are nice, to Israel. When she says, your people will be my people, that is an incredible statement of faith, because she's saying, okay, I know they're really, really ugly. But if that's what it takes to have your God as my God, I will go. And she goes. So she goes back, and when they get back, she shows her loyalty to her mother and to God himself. Ruth and Naomi return, and Naomi says, don't call me Naomi, which means pleasant. Call me Mara, which means bitter, because the Lord has made my life very Mara, very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. So that's where I get the empty and the full thing here, because the writer actually encourages us to think that way. And so that's why I say in 1a, Naomi is emptied. So she comes back. Will she ever get full again? Well, watch. So in chapter 2, we meet Boaz, and Ruth meets Boaz. But before Ruth meets Boaz, we get to meet him, and we meet him, and we learn about him as he greets his workers. Now, notice this little vignette. This is so sweet. Just then, Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and greeted the harvesters. The Lord be with you. And they respond, may the Lord bless you! Exclamation point. Now, let's just talk about that for a second. Anybody here ever worked for a really hard secular group of people? Teamsters or, warehouse or anything like that, construction crews, or I don't know, ladies, maybe you have too. I've done lots of that stuff, and I have heard the workers talk about the boss and use God's name a lot. Nobody ever said, may God bless him. It was always the opposite, right? Because almost every place you work, the boss is the guy who has the power, who doesn't treat you very well. When you get a situation like this where the boss comes and the workers say, oh, wow, seriously, exclamation point, may God's richest blessing fall upon you. You know it's because he's used his power in a different way than most bosses do. He has indeed blessed their lives, and they want to return the blessing back to him. So that tells us a little bit of what Boaz is like to begin with, right? And then next thing we see is he meets Ruth. Now, again, before you get this, sweet little love story in your head, think about this, right? Let's just act it out. I asked Ariel if she would be Ruth for me today, okay? So it's the problem of sitting in this spot. You get picked on all the time, right? It's my class. I get to be Boaz. Going to make her Ruth, okay? So you say, okay, weird story about the professor and student. Think of it this way. if you think he's walking up to her and she's excited because she's thinking, oh, I'm getting ready to meet the man of my dreams, think again. Let's go back to what it was really like in the days when the judges ruled, right? So here she is alone in Israel. She knows what Israelite men are like because she lives in the days of the judges. She sees that when I come up, everybody greets me. And it's like, oh, okay, I'm not sure what they're saying necessarily, but I can tell he's the big guy. He's the guy with the power, right? And he looks up and he catches her eye and he sees her and he starts to walk over to her. Now, let's be totally realistic about this. What is the only thing in the world that she can possibly be thinking at this point? I mean, put yourself back in the story. Put yourself back in the days of the judges. The only thing she can be thinking is absolute terror. She's thinking, here's the guy who has all the power, and he's coming over to me, and this is going to be really, really, really bad for me. I don't have a dad. I don't have brothers. I don't have anybody to protect me. I don't have a husband. I've come to this place, and now I'm totally at the mercy. I'm a foreigner in this land. And what is the first thing he says to her? The very first words he says are these. So Boaz said to Ruth, my daughter. Now, that's a term of maybe affection, but care, and certainly not a sexual innuendo at all, right? This is not some stupid pickup line from the book. This is not, hey, heifer, like Samson. This is a term of care and protection. And notice what else he says here to her, right? Let me just take a look at the text and just read it here. Boaz said to Ruth, my daughter, don't go and glean in another field, and don't go away from here. Stay here with my servant girls. Watch the field where the men are harvesting, and follow along after the girls. I've told the men not to touch you. Now, does that ring true? Absolutely it does, right? If we know what Israelite men are like, he says, look, you stay right here, you'll be okay. Stay with the girls. I've told the men not even to touch you. That's very realistic with what we've been given in the story of Judges. And then it goes on and it says this, and whenever you're thirsty, go and get a drink from the water jars the men have filled. Do you remember what they did down there in Gaza? They made the women grind the grain here. But in Boaz's field, it's very different. Do you know how you get water jars filled at this field? You don't go over to the spigot and turn it on and just have them all there. You go to a well that's 50 feet deep and you put the bucket down, and it's heavy, hard work to bring the water up. And Boaz says, no, we have noticed physiologically the guys have bigger muscles. Is it hard work? Yeah, but they're more appropriately suited for it. We're going to let the men do that kind of work here. It's not like we're going to let the women just get by. Everybody works hard here. I mean, Ruth is out here working hard gleaning. But it's suddenly like the world's kind of turned right side up. And the men are not abusing the women. The men are using their power to help the women, and the women are helping the men here. And it's like society that's functioning correctly. And I'm sure Ruth would say, wow, there aren't any other fields in Israel that work like this. And Boaz says, well, this isn't any other field. This is where I'm in charge. This is where I rule. This is how we rule. Okay? And so it gets even better, because when you get over here to lunchtime, look at how the text goes. At mealtime, Boaz said to her, come over here, have some bread, and dip it in the wine vinegar. When she sat down with the harvesters, he offered her some roasted grain. She ate all she wanted and had some left over. Right? So let's use the words of the writer. She comes, well, you tell me, you get up early in the morning, you work really, really hard. How do you feel at noontime? It comes a little empty and she goes away full. Right. In fact, notice every time she comes in contact with him, she comes empty and she goes away full. It is not the other way around. Notice the metaphor. I don't think I have to break it down for you. She does not come just to give to him. He gives to her. He cares for her. He doesn't use her to get stuff for himself. And then I love this part too, because, as you're reading through the book of Judges, everything seems so crude and so base and so earthy. By the way, Samson talks to the women in his life and on and on and on. Get up, let's go. The Levite. Here, it says this, verse 15. As she got up to glean, Boaz gave orders to his men. Even if she gathers among the sheaves, don't embarrass her. Rather, pull out some stalks for her from the bundles and leave them for her to pick up, and don't rebuke her. I mean, he's caring for her emotionally. It's not because he has romantic concerns. He has none of those at this point. He's just a good guy who's taking care of people who feel out of it. She's from a foreign land. She's here. Don't embarrass her. You guys don't do anything stupid. Don't be talking about her and snickering and then look over her way. None of that stuff in my field. You guys, in fact, leave a few extra for her so she has something to take home to her mother-in-law. Amazing, amazing goodness in this guy's heart. So, as the story goes, she goes home and she says in chapter 2 and verse 20, says, Mom, you're never going to believe what I found. I found this guy who was nice. I didn't know they existed anymore. And Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, he's not stopped showing his kindness to living and the dead. She added, that man is our close relative. He's one of our kinsman redeemers. Now, what's beautiful about this is that this is the absolute middle verse in the entire book. This is the turning point. Kinsman redeemer, somebody who's close to us, one of our family, whose job it is to protect us and pull us into the family. And in this case, indeed, according to Deuteronomy, to actually marry the widow so that she won't be destitute and a woman helpless among the men of Israel. So she says, wow, that's incredible. That's amazing. Yeah, it absolutely is. So she goes back to him, chapter 3, and asks if he would indeed be the kinsman redeemer. Now, I know that this story can be misunderstood because she goes at night. Like, is she trying to seduce him or something? Why does she sleep by his feet? And I think what's going on is this. I think she goes at night so as not to manipulate him in public. Right? She goes to ask him privately, would you be the kinsman redeemer? And if not, that's okay. That's cool. Not to put any pressure on. It wasn't a sexual thing. She doesn't sleep beside him. She sleeps at the bottom. He's there protecting the grain during the harvest. That's what's going on. And he says to her, look, everybody knows that you are a virtuous woman. Same word used in Proverbs 31. You're a woman of character. Yes, I will do this if I can. And then, oh, by the way, don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed. Always filling her up. So then, in chapter 4, Boaz redeems Ruth, but there's this funny little story that should be edited out because we don't have enough space for this story. Slight sarcasm here. About him going to the gate of the city, which is like the court system. Because as it turns out, there's another guy who actually has a closer relative who has the first right to redeem her. Now, just stop right there for a second. In the book of Judges, when men want something, how do they get it? You know what to do. Go take it. That's how we work. In the book of Ruth, how does Boaz go about things? Decently, in order, lawfully, above board, where everyone can see. No secret manipulation here. You have the first right. Would you like to redeem her? And the guy says, no, that would cost me too much because then I would have to split up my inheritance and give it to her offspring. No, I'm not doing that. That's too expensive. I don't want to do that. And Boaz says, I'm not worried about that. I just see this woman who's part of my family, extended family, who needs protection. And yeah, I will redeem her. And so he does. And of course, the way the story then goes is that they have a baby. Right? And notice I put up here, conclusion, Naomi is filled. Now you might think, wait a minute, Ruth is the one who has the baby. No. Look at this. Look at the way the story goes. The women living there said, Naomi has a son. Did they get it wrong? No, they didn't. Ruth had the son, but Naomi has a grandson. And the whole point is that Naomi, in particular, was most desperate and now has someone to care for her in her old age. She's indeed redeemed in this sense and cared for in this sense. And then Obed, and he was the father of Jesse, the father of David. And then, because they're Jewish people, they finish with a genealogy, right? So-and-so is the father of so-and-so, and so-and-so is the father of so-and-so, and so-and-so is the father of so-and-so, and so-and-so is the father of so-and-so. And I just want you to notice how this book actually ends. Have you noticed what the very last word in the book is? Very last word in the book. David. Wow, what's that all about? First verse, in the days when the judges ruled. Middle word, kinsman redeemer. Last word, David. You get it? You see what the writer's trying to say? We got this horrible, horrible time of Judges. What will ever get us out of it? It's got to be a kind of a godly man who will give to people and care for them. Where are we going to find a guy like that? He's kind of a Boaz, kind of a person. His name is David. So, before we get that far, though, let me say this. As we move through the stories, look for three things. You said, I thought that was just for Judges. I told you they're one book, really. Right? The changes that take place were like that, and now how would you describe them? I think we're going up, don't you? Your own affective response, how do you feel? Before I said sick and empty. Now I'm going to say I feel healthy and full, if you understand what I mean. Number three, how does the role of women relate to the main theme? We already said women suffer the effects of sin. That's what we already said last screen. But what I want to add to it now is this. Women flourish and help others flourish when men play their roles well. Right? The whole society starts to work when guys do what they're supposed to do. So we can see at least two levels in Ruth. What Boaz does for Ruth on a personal level is exactly what David is going to do for Israel on a national level. And herein is the place where it now corresponds to Judges. This is why I say it's the answer. It tells us in a very personal story of Boaz and Ruth. But the point is that David is simply a Boaz kind of a guy. In fact, I would even go so far as to say that David is not 1,000 times better than Boaz. I think David's probably the same as Boaz, or maybe Boaz is better than David. It's just that God has a bigger stage for David to play on than he did Boaz. But it's the kind of character of Boaz that makes the whole thing work. And now those are the two levels in the book. I think all of us can kind of imagine, hey, we could take this one level further, right? And we could say that the son of David is going to do on an international level what Boaz did personally, what David did nationally. And the ultimate kinsman redeemer is going to come through this. But that's not in this book yet. We're stealing from the New Testament there, so I'll just leave it at this. Now, I want to say one more thing about this. I think you've probably got the big idea of where this fits in the story of redemption, but it also speaks to us really loudly about male-female relationships, about what it means to be human. So let me just break this down for you very quickly, too, so you can see the theology of what it means to really be human. And I'm going to say, what does it mean to be human? And I'm going to say, when a human lives close to God, it's going to be stuff that is up there near the top of the screen. When humans get far away from God, things which are not like God, things which are sin, we move to the bottom of the screen. So to be made in God's image, to be fully human, to really understand what it is to be human, is not to be sinful. It's to be far away from sin. And when you get far away from God, you become almost subhuman or more like an animal, more like a beast. Think of the book of Judges. Now, I can take God's image, or the Imago Dei, and break it down into its parts. So let me do that, make it more relatable, okay? And I'll say that part of what it means to be made in God's image is that you're rational, you can think, you can make good choices. When you get far away from God, you become irrational. To be made in God's image means that you are relational, you're meant to relate to other people well. And when you get far away from God, I become anti-relational. When we're close to God, we were meant to be physical, sexual beings. God made them in His image. Male and female, He made them. When we get far away from God, we become people who don't procreate and give life. We become like people who take life and give death. And we were intended to be rulers, to rule things well, and when we get far away from God, we become abusive rulers, right? So let's just think back here through the book. In the book of Judges, think about the irrational stuff people do. I mean, why in the world did he go to Gaza? Why in the world did he toy with Delilah? Oh yeah, if you cut my hair, I'll be like any other man. Are you stupid? Hey, I got a good idea. Let's go kill all the guys in Jabesh Gilead. That'll work. I mean, the irrationality, the stupid decisions just boggle the mind. Anti-relational. If you hadn't plowed with my heifer, you wouldn't have got my riddle. Come on, get up, let's go. Death and abuse, abusive rulers. But if you take a look at the book of Ruth, look at this. Is there anything rational going on in the book of Ruth? There's everything rational. I mean, the very first chapter, your God will be my God. That is the smartest, most rational choice a person can ever make. And then that whole bit about, going in front of the gates and the courts, we will do this rationally. Relationally, look at the tenderness you find in the book of Ruth. Don't embarrass her. Physical and sexual. Goodness sakes, look what happens at the end. What happens in the last chapter of the book? Something as simple as we have a baby that's born. Do you understand how unique that is in the book of Judges? There's no life in Judges. There's just death. And then finally, look what kind of a ruler, Boaz is. Your field runs differently than most fields. Yeah, it does. Right? We're going to rule out of a position of love and righteousness instead of selfishness and greed. So, you can do the same kind of thing if we just do this even on the masculine scale. Right? And I just say this to the guys because what we're looking for is good leaders here, right? And so I say, what does it mean to be a man made in God's image? Well, it means that God has given you power in order to love people. He has made you, just in the most basic sense, with bigger muscles. To work hard. To use that to give, not to coerce. But you can use your power to abuse, like we saw in the book of Judges. He's made you to be generous and giving, but you can be all about taking from other people. And I mean the whole spectrum, not just money, but getting whatever you can from other people. He's made you to use your freedom to bless other people, not to oppress other people. So let's just put Samson down here, and let's put Boaz up here. I mean, this again is part of the reason why the traditional model of trying to make Samson out to be a hero just so grates against me. You understand that? I mean, it's easy to be attracted to be kind of like a Samson. I suppose maybe, I'm not female in my mind. I don't work that way, but maybe it's easy for females to be attracted to a Samson. I don't know. I sure hope not. So guys, who do you want to be? You want to be a Samson or do you want to be a Boaz? Ladies, what do you want? Do you want a Samson or do you want a Boaz? Ladies, what do you want to be? You want to be a Ruth or do you want to be a prostitute from Gaza? You've got all those range of choices here, and what it shows us is that as you stay away from sin, as you stay close to God, you get the freedom, the ability to live out what it really means to be human and to flourish and to bless other people. And you can see what happens on an individual level. You can see what happens on a national level when people know who the right leader is. And so I just want to say that this book is in some ways about the history of Israel and looking for the right leader, but it's absolutely immediately true for us. Is Jesus king of your life? And if he is, your life will indeed rise to the top of the chart. And to the degree that he is not the king and the leader in your life will move to the bottom of the chart. In very practical, personal terms that are important for all of us. There's the story of Judges and, praise God, Ruth.